And I think we are live now. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, episode 20. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the Tenkaichi tournament and its initiation. But before we get to that, we do have some addendums from the last episode. But we'd like to welcome everyone. I think we had a successful Myth and Meaning episode a couple days ago. You should go check it out. But this live stream, we're going to be focusing on that. We've also changed a little bit of the format, so if you see a little bit of some of the bugs, just let us know, and we'll change those accordingly.
Yeah, just drop it in the chat.
But first, we do have addendums from the last episode. I'm going to let Brok go first. I have one thing to say, and he has one thing to say.
Yeah, so one thing that we didn't bring up before when we were talking about Yamcha returning back into the city was the fact that he did not take Puar with him, right? So we have this immediate differentiation of how it means something different for Yamcha to be out in the wilderness as opposed to being out in the desert, right? It's not the same situation that he is in as far as his character progression goes, right? It's to say that he has to be very focused and united in himself, right? We can't really erase the character Puar, but this has to be a total body and mind. Everything has to be focused towards the training so that he can be like Goku, right? Have this hierarchy.
Disagreeable and competitive spirit, right? That's a masculine logos spirit, and Puar is not that. So, and Puar is, nurturing kind of the, what do I want to say, the representation of femininity that Yamcha can conceive of. And so it wouldn't be of use to him to have
Well, think of the situations in your life at times where you've over-nurtured yourself, right? Where you think to yourself like, oh, I could really use some time off. I could use some time to myself. I'm really overworked when you know that you're not. You don't need that nurturing spirit if you're going to be doing what Yamcha's doing, right? Which is he's trying to conquer the domain of self-sufficiency. So it makes sense that Puar would not help him serve that for himself.
And that's to say, to get stronger, people have to challenge themselves. I think that's a succinct way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I wanted to say was the proof of the integration between Bulma and Oolong. In this scene, before Yamcha arrives, Oolong says that Yamcha's probably dead. Oolong says that out loud.
Says probably dead in a ditch somewhere.
Yeah, specifically those words.
Mm-hmm.
And so then later on, Bluma says, for all I know, or actually no, she says, I thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere. Proving the connection between them, right? You have Oolong's speech being Bluma's inner thoughts. And both of them stayed with Bluma in the city because both of those spirits can cohabitate in the city where there's a lot more, let's say, leniency in the strength of spirit that you can have.
Well, and you can also think about, like, before this, the only Bulma we knew was a Bulma who was out on an adventure, right? Who is out confronting the unknown. And the space that she's staying now is within the boons of society, right? And so she's kind of in this space where she has a disconnected masculine and feminine element staying with her, keeping her in this stasis in the city, right? And, we already know that she's lost her capsules previously because she doesn't take those boons seriously. She takes them for granted, right? And so the space that she's in right now is as soon as we see her, she's resentful, and she thinks that she's deserving of things outside of herself for the sake of just her own interior worth, right?
Right, and I mean, that's kind of a regression in her character, and that's why we see Oolong in the communist uniform, I think, and we kind of touched on that last episode, but I just wanted to wrap that up in the addendums before we start the next episode, which is about the beginning of the Tenkaichi Budokai. Now, in this episode, and actually, before we even get into what happens, I want to talk about this symbology. Why are there demons everywhere at the tournament, Brok?
Why are there demons everywhere at the tournament? You could liken this, I've been bringing some of the Christian references into this, but you can liken this to the demons and gargoyles drawn on the margins of Christian art, and in the same way that you have gargoyles surrounding the perimeter of mansions, right? Why would you have a demon on the exterior of cathedrals as well, right? So I think that it's the reason that I would say there's demons here is because this is the pinnacle of confronting chaos, confronting the unknown for the sake of the spirit of honoring the self or honoring the betterment of the self, right?
I would say that I think you're on the right track. I would say that the reason is because what it means to adopt the spirit that is present within the tournament is to already be above those evil spirits, and you can actually, people, once they get to that point, can make those demons serve them. Kind of like a Solomon thing, right?
Well, it's to speak of the interior, right? Because a lot of this has to do with the self, right? It's very interior. So these are like interior demons, and the conquering of your interior demons is something that is, I think what you're saying is necessary for you to even be here.
Right, and so it's a representation of that ascendancy above that original, let's say, hierarchy, which a lot of people contend with. This is we're already at the cream of the crop, let's say.
Yeah, this is like the church of fighting.
Exactly, and that's why that righteousness is what allows the demons to be represented in such a way as to not be threatening, but rather subservient to the ideal.
Yeah, and I hadn't really considered that as far as the imagery goes, but it's, knowing what happens further in Dragon Ball, of course. The fact that there are demons present here and what it's going to mean later on when we approach the idea of literal demons, we're setting this up already, right?
Right, exactly. And it wasn't by accident. So let's go here to the sky and the title slide. I know we named this Elimination Round. That's because I think it's a little bit more fitting than Will It Appear the Power from the Training. It is about the fruits of the boys' training, but it is also the Elimination Round, and there's kind of the focus on that elimination, that sorting of hierarchy. I think that's a more important idea than seeing the fruits of the boys' training. We already know that they're going to be strong.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea of whether or not the power from their training will appear and the name Elimination Round also kind of ties together to say they are the Elimination Round in this episode. They're eliminating everybody, and that's how their power manifests, is that it's to sort out what doesn't cut it against the Turtle Hermit way, you could say.
Right, and we do see a lot of elimination from the boys. That's specifically, and at first, Krillin is overwhelmed by the competitive nature of the contestants. I think this goes in hand of Krillin's neuroticism. Krillin is far more neurotic than Goku. Mm-hmm. And he is initially... This could have caused him to lose, I want to say. His psyche about the other competitors could have caused him to lose had Goku not been there, let's say.
Yeah, I think that is a sort of manifestation of the fragility of the ego. In the face of all of this, like, you need to be able to rely on your confidence. And Krillin's a very egocentric character whenever we meet him. He's very, obsessed with how he appears, right? He's always criticizing Goku for not appearing like he knows what he's doing. He's very much in that space where he's self-conscious, right?
In fact, the first time we see him, he lands into the sand and then immediately begins brushing himself off to make himself
sort of
look
strikes
better.
a pose, right?
Strikes a pose and then defends his baldness, his choice of baldness, his appearance. You're right.
So yeah, I think that the daunting nature is to say that, the reality of the situation is something that your ego alone can't really deal with, and that it's natural to doubt yourself in the face of that, but you can rely on the power of your character, right? And that's more what Goku represents.
Right, I agree. That's why I would say Goku is not fazed at all by the mass of the challengers, because it really is appearance based. Is Krillin's fear?
Yeah, I think ego is a great way to put it, though. Just the self-consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. And also, I had talked a little bit about how I thought that Krillin was sort of a manifestation of Goku's self-consciousness, based on his comparing himself to Master Roshi, right? Like a mini Roshi for him as an extension, right? In the same way that we were talking about Oolong being tied to Bulma, Krillin is extremely tied into Goku in that way.
It's true. How deep is that connection?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'll have to finish a rewatch before I can talk about how deep I think that connection really is. But I mean, if I'm right, you know, if it's good to go down that route, sort of making that connection, go all the way up to Goku going Super Saiyan. Not to get ahead of anything, but that's sort of where I'm leaning on my analysis right now. Now, I've never rewatched all of Dragon Ball, right? So all of what we're talking about right now is based on my first rewatch. So,
Or your
we'll
first
see.
watch, really?
Yeah. The first time you watch it, it kind of goes right over your head.
We are rewatching the episodes. Okay. Of Goku self-consciousness. We're going to have to talk about that.
I know. It's
I don't think that may be the case here in this first. Well,
it's a big idea.
it is a really big idea. That's why I want to pause on it.
Yeah. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but
no,
it's a big idea.
You don't have to, but I don't know if it's Goku's self-consciousness.
I don't think it's literally that, in the same way that I don't think that Puar is literally the anima, right? But the impetus for what he represents for Goku on a basis, right?
Go on.
Is
Just
that,
explain this.
well, I don't want to go beyond the scope of this episode too far, but
just
talking
use
about
evidence you already have.
Sure. So we have the situation where Goku has been accepted by Roshi, right, as a student. And then something that comes rushing up from behind to catch up with Goku is this, Krillin, a smaller Roshi who understands Roshi's blindness, right, his perversion, right? He's a bit more in tune with that aspect of Roshi, right? And so he's a manifestation of the things about Roshi that Goku doesn't need to take on to be better in character. He's
right.
an
That's
ego,
why I
right?
think that he's more of a manifestation of Roshi. And
Maybe.
he evolves in that way. I think
Could
he's
be.
way more connected to Roshi.
Well, I think maybe what we're saying is both true. That thing that Goku gets that's very ego-driven is a manifestation of the existence of Roshi in the first place, the inevitable flaw of the father, right?
Right. I think we're a little ways from Goku self-consciousness.
Yeah. But you see what I'm saying, right?
We'll get into it a little more as we, I think, next season.
Yeah, we're getting into that real get the mic territory now.
Yeah, we are, because we're having some disagreements, and
that's good. Yeah. Good. I think that's where we're gonna really suss out what's going on with the show, right?
Sure. Okay, so Krillin's scared, whatever. Meanwhile, the Dragon Gang is trying to watch, and Bluma wants Oolong to help her watch. Now, she still has control over Oolong, and she still is taking advantage of it. Do you think this is going to end well for Bluma?
Oh,
After
definitely.
all, Master Roshi always gets his just desserts. Now, the thoughtery, is that rewarded?
Obviously not. What's interesting to me about this scene is what it means that Bulma, without standing on Oolong, can't see the elimination round, right? It's like,
yeah, she's not elevated to high enough status
on her own, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's not integrated, so she has to stand on something that doesn't serve her just to be able to
Well,
see.
not only something that doesn't serve her, but something that actively takes her, let's say, dignity.
Yeah, she has to
Because
stand on that.
He's staring at her panties the whole time that he's doing this.
Well, it's kind of like to say, to gaze upon the bettering of oneself represented in the hierarchical nature that the tournament is, for Bulma to even see that, she's immediately confronted with a situation that's supposed to humble her, right?
Right. Well, and
in order to see it, she has to risk that humiliation,
because the strength of her spirit is so weak.
Yeah, which I don't think, it's like a universal, but I think that's why this happens in the first place, right? It's like,
no,
she needs that wisdom.
If people can't see the inherent value of bettering themselves, then they're not really going to see it, right?
Right.
That's what's happening here. Like, sure, people can watch self-betterment things, and they cannot absorb them.
Right. And it's great because she watches a match, sees somebody get ring. I think she sees a ring out, and then following that, she has to lose a battle. Right. It's like seeing someone's mode of being not being good enough reminds you that your mode of being is not as good as it could be. Right.
Right. Exactly. And in order to just see it, yeah, she has to remind herself who she is better than.
Yeah, and she can't. She has to rely on that to even be able to see.
Right.
She has to be at her vulnerabilities
it's
mercy.
a literal ego boost.
Yeah.
A literal ego boost.
It's like, give me an ego boost so I can
yeah.
try to compare myself to these great people, and then immediately.
Well, then we'll see what happens. It's not immediate. This happened.
Yeah. It's not.
She's able to stay up there for a while.
Soon enough.
And so then we get to see the explanation of the hierarchy here. The Tenkaichi Best Under the Heavens tournament. Now we see here just hierarchies, right? Pyramids of competency. 4 of them. It's competency of competencies right in front of you, spelled out.
Mm-hmm.
And the 8 above, the 8 that win those will move on to the tournament of tournaments.
Exactly.
Where the test of one's spirit is against those who have also transcended, let's say.
Yeah, it's like, we had sort of talked about the hierarchy, or the archetypal mountain, right? And buildings, large buildings also being similar to that, where we've shown different depictions, even in like Myth and Meaning. And so it's like, where they learned about this was on top of a square mountain, right? A house on top of a square mountain. And you could see that, imagine that as a representation of one of these brackets where it's like hierarchy of hierarchies. That was at the point of a hierarchy. And there's this escalation of that imagery, And so depicting it this way, it's obviously logical, but it also is just another physical representation of those triangles, right? Those upward triangles.
It's why tournaments are interesting to watch. And I think, tournaments are not just in Dragon Ball. They're in a bunch of different mediums of fiction, anime included.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason is because of that draw to see who is the most competent. Because, and this is something Dr. Peterson talks about in his first rules book, his 12 Rules for Life, is about the ennobling of the human spirit through the, let's say, breaking of one's limits.
Right. Talks about watching a performance that is like a 9.9 and then seeing someone beat that, right? And that sort of idea that everyone is so moved by it that they have to stand up and cheer and express their satisfaction at the sorting of someone into a hierarchy based on them breaking their own limits or surpassing what they know they can do, right? And that's what this is about. Because I think for Goku and Krillin, it's really just about being able to find a test, a sufficient test of how strong they are in character.
Right. And Goku's pretty strong, I'd say.
Pretty strong in character.
Krillin, and I think Krillin, like I was indicating earlier, I think Krillin is more akin to Roshi in saying that he doesn't have the boon of celestial parents or anything like that, but he is able to break through his barriers. Even in this first season that we see him in, he is able to overcome a lot, and he doesn't even understand how strong his strength of spirit is.
Right, because he is very questioning, right? He has not been as forthright in accepting. Forthright in accepting is probably a bad way of saying it, but he has not taken it seriously that he's actually getting something good out of Roshi's training. He's really just he's been conciliatory, whereas Goku's just been like, okay.
Well, he's had to subordinate himself to the idea of Roshi's training. I think that's kind of what the first couple of episodes were when Roshi was kind of breaking his obstinate spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think that ties into that egocentric nature of Krillin, right? That
right.
He's very much, it's the irony, right? His ego is based on nothing. the last thing that we know of that happened to him before he got there in the
He was
first
getting
place was that
bullied.
he got his ass kicked and then ran away, you know? So it's that fragile ego. But this is this is the episode to show that he has learned to go beyond that, right?
Right. And I think that happens soonish. Okay, so yeah, this is whenever they draw the lots and they see those hierarchy of hierarchies. None of them are fighting each other, but Krillin is still freaking out because I think he thought that he was in the same bracket as Goku.
Yeah, he doesn't want to pit himself up against Goku.
And that's another thing that is about Krillin. Like, he's cowardly, sure, but that, again, is because he doesn't know the strength of his own spirit. He hasn't actually put its resolve to the test. We haven't seen that yet, but we will.
Right.
And
remember,
right,
the last fight he had, he fought. Or, I mean, he lost. Right. Like, we don't... Krillin's not a big lobster right now. He's a small lobster.
No, exactly. He's had a lot of losses, and so getting back into the fighting spirit is tough.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no Master Roshi ain't gonna give him no serotonin to go fight another battle. He's gonna have to overcome it.
Yeah, he's gonna have to get it himself.
But I do want to say the two expressions here from Yamcha and Goku, they have some reverence and some awe in the face of the board of hierarchies.
Yeah, the challenge itself, right?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Yamcha's already adopted that spirit. The only issue is, and we kind of addressed this last episode, is that he is putting the cart before the horse, trying to be the strongest before trying to better himself.
Yeah, he's overconfident. And so we can see that in this image too, where Goku is just wide eyes. He's just taking the information in. Yamcha is cocksure, and Krillin is scared. I mean, it's great because you can tell these are based on manga panels, because whenever you're drawing manga, you really have to pack a lot more context into a single frame. And these frames are tight.
They're pretty tight. And then we see Goku's first match against this strong guy. And of course, Toriyama loves to do this. He has a big guy.
There's so many big guys.
There's so many big guys. But again, it's the appearance, it's the ego, pumped up. And let's say intimidating for sure, but substanceless in the end.
Right. This is a test of intimidation for Goku. Is he going to be like Krillin? If Krillin was in this fight starting out, right, then he wouldn't have the exact same reaction as Goku, let's say.
He might be a little bit more spooked.
Yeah.
But here, Goku's very nature of being forthright is enough to destroy the spirit of this power lifter, who is more or less embodying that power fantasy mindset instead of the bettering yourself mindset.
Yeah, sort of a test to say, is your identity wrapped up in how strong you are? Nah, like
exactly. And the insults as well, the display of weak character prior to his defeat is another thing that Toriyama will consistently do.
Yeah, he underestimates Goku. He talks down to him. He tries to intimidate him. And, of course, all characters seem to represent different modes of being. And the mode of being here is very egocentric. And it's very, like, by my own strength, I've earned this win. Which is not far from, let's say, where Yamcha is in his head.
It's true. Yamcha is just the
He's like,
superior
by my fighting prowess, I win.
superior execution of this idea. But and Goku afterwards does tell Krillin, "Hey, we're pretty strong. Chill out." And then what happens is Krillin's old bullies show up, and they begin bullying him again. Krillin, having low, let's say, confidence at this point, small lobster, we'll use that. Is unable to really stand up for himself in his speech, what do you think about that?
I think part of the Turtle Hermit way is speaking the truth. That's why the Kamehameha is the way that it is. And Krillin is having a hard time defending himself because he's not technically used to that strength in character where he says, when what he says is going to match his feelings. And he's scared right now, right? The last time he fought these guys, he was bullied and he was basically ran away. So now He's in this space where he could present himself in this egotistical way, and yet he really doesn't know what to do to defend himself here because he's like, I mean, he has to say, to be forthright, right? To be the Krillin who would beat them in a fight of character, let's say. He can't stand on an egotistical response here.
Well, and in my understanding, too, it is that Krillin is not proficient enough in telling the truth to be able to do it in this instance. Instead, all he can do is not lie.
Right, the truth being that he's lived better than them and he's been more forthright and he deserves the win more than they do. He can't really...
And explaining, let's say, the pathology of their existence, he's not going to be able to do that.
But he can not puff himself up.
And he can be that physical manifestation of how they should be. And we're going to see that in the next thing. No, not yet. First, we're going to talk about Blooma's reward for treating the simp the way she does.
Right, so she has witnessed a battle, and so what happened immediately has happened.
Does this happen right after... No. Krillin has not fought yet. Goku's the only one that fought.
Right, so she's witnessed a loss. So she has her embarrassment because, well, by witnessing it, she was standing on an ego boost, right, that came out from under her, and she was exposed to, well, all of these men, right? So
the idea, right... And I think you put this well earlier, the knowledge of bettering oneself and you actively, or a person actively not partaking in that, it's gonna make that person self-conscious of their own flaws. And that's exactly what happens here, right?
Yeah, this is the dream that you have where you're in your underwear in an auditorium, right? This is a manifestation of that same sort of like, your vulnerability is something that you need to incorporate, right? You need to understand it and integrate it. And she's disintegrated, hence the presence of Oolong.
Yes. And Oolong actually does defend her here, but that is what a simp would do.
This is the manifestation of, like, let's say the simp who wants to buy a picture that they know is only for them and that no one else can get it. It's a one-of-a-kind picture from the thought. This is Oolong protecting his simp investment.
Right, exactly. And he has invested.
Right, because he suffered for it. And, you know, he's like, oh, the perk of me being her ladder is that I get to look up at her on the hierarchy. I get to look up her dress, right?
Yeah, he's pretty okay with the exchange, I'd say. But yeah, this is her getting her just desserts. And I think it's Toriyama also saying that not only does Roshi get his rewards for acting the way he does, but Bluma also gets the rewards for acting in the pathological way that she does.
Right.
Yamcha, too. Yamcha gets out in the first round every tournament because of his aim. It's only going to get you so far.
Yeah, you haven't learned the lesson, right?
And Toriyama repeatedly puts these lessons instilled into individual
Right,
characters.
and he's saying here, like, this is not... this is related, right? This is not necessarily a less noble thing for Bulma, right? That her recognizing the significance of the loss in the hierarchy, it's like this is something they can learn from, but this is also something she can learn from, right? She's not above learning from it, right?
Yeah, but Brok, she don't know punch.
Oh, right. She doesn't fight. That's right. She's not. She's just
not even part of the show.
That's right. I forgot. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And then we get back to the fight, the fight with Clearin and his bullies. And it's actually interesting that we see first Krillin measuring up to them and then Bluma getting her reward, right? Because Krillin is brave enough to actually still face them. And that idea, I think, is what really leads to Bluma being exposed. Now, here we see exactly what I was saying earlier. The manifestation of Krillin's existence is far superior to the, let's say, what do I even want to say? What would you say is a bullying complex? Like, how would you distill that into
it's a superiority complex.
Sure, superiority complex. And really some narcissism involved too, because clearly aren't respecting like the turtle hermit school either. They're not.
Right, they're not just disrespecting him. He's wearing the clothes.
Mm-hmm. And we've talked about that earlier. What the clothes mean. But his and I like how Goku tells him not to hold back. Krillin is able to send him flying so hard that he's out, like he's out of the hierarchy.
I think Goku actually tells him to hold back. He says, "Hey, we should probably be careful because we don't know how strong we really are."
Except for this guy.
Oh, that's right.
After
That's
the
right.
talk,
yeah.
right? He's like, send him out of here. And so Krillin kicks him so hard that he's out of the hierarchy. He's just out. There's
He
no getting
removes
back
him
in.
from the
He
equation.
removes him from it. Yeah.
Well, not only that. So he doesn't touch Krillin. He comes for Krillin, and Krillin's like, "Okay, I guess I better dodge." And he's so fast and he's so strong that that's it. All he does is dodge and hit once, knocks him through the wall. And this ties right back into Bulma's story in the episode too. It's great.
It ties into Bulma's story, and it ties into this guy who I don't even know if we get his name, but this guy's story. The knowledge of Krillin being so superior to him is shattering enough, and probably I would assume his ego isn't able to recover.
No, it's destroyed
because he picked on this guy for so long, and now look at him. The idea of someone bettering himself is so alien to him, and that he's unable to fathom it. But I think we're able to go on here. So then we see how it ties into Bulma's story, and I'll let you go ahead.
Well, it's great because they go for ice cream after Bulma gets embarrassed in front of everybody. And these are separated scenes that I just went ahead and mashed together, but Bulma mentions to Oolong that in the Japanese she says, if you turned yourself into a ladder, I might give you my panties, right? Because Oolong is basically like, I'm done helping you, right? And she tells him that, and he stores that away in his brain. And then later on, she says something about the fight being on. And he says, okay, let's go. Turns himself into a ladder and hops off to go earn her panties, right? The Oolong story, the pursuit of it's ironic too in a way, because it's like what Oolong ultimately wants for Bulma is to reintegrate, right? He wants the legitimacy to be returned, right? The thing that he wants Bulma to get her modesty back, and for ultimately, right, as sort of a meta narrative. And so he's like, I got to get the panties again, because that's what motivates him. And when he rushes back over, there's a huge hole in the wall, and he just runs into it and falls over because he's irrelevant already.
Yeah, the utility of a simp only goes so far.
Mm-hmm.
Not very. And so now they can see the matches within. And I think it's also part of the sacrifice that Bulma has made, that she also gets, let's say, a silver lining to the cloud.
Well, it's like, you were humiliated. You've been humbled enough to actually to watch the battles, right? To witness this. Like, the humiliation is a precursor for you being allowed to better yourself, right? Like, it's a necessary thing that you go through, and then the hole is opened up for you to actually start engaging with the betterment process.
Yes. Okay, so then then we see a little montage of the boys kicking some ass. Here they go. And I think I just moved away from the mic there on accident.
Yeah, this just basically shows that not only were they strong enough to win a fight, they're above this tier. So they clean house.
Yeah, they are already masters of this hierarchy.
Yep. So they literally just go one by one and one-shot a bunch of opponents. In the case of Krillin, his opponent attacks him, and Krillin makes a joke out of it. He just laughs at him.
And he surrenders.
And he's like, oh, if that attack was a joke to you, I just give up.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say, why is Yamcha past this level? We know why the boys are.
Yamcha, I would say that Yamcha is past this level because of the self-sufficiency that he's gained over the course of him going out into the wilderness and integrating in the way that he has.
Well, I would argue that the events of season 1 are what allowed him to. His journey through the desert, finding meaning and some sense of enlightenment, a glimpse of it, is able to put him above them.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, it's the same idea. Yeah, that he would go into the wilderness for that training in the first place is a reflection.
Right,
of that.
and that his goal is far more articulated, let's say, than some of them.
Yeah, he's been able to orient himself very well towards a specific goal, whereas I think that a lot of these characters are more focused on appearing stronger than their opponents. There's a lot of trash talking, there's a lot of bravado, right? And so all of our heroes are sort of overcoming the imagery of what these guys represent, right? Because there's like a professional boxer, there's a martial artist here, there's another martial artist there. So they're the images of being high in the sort of fighting hierarchy.
Well, I also like that we're on the subject of Yamcha because him going out into the wilderness is exactly what he's challenged with in the preliminary rounds. And I think you were going to say something about this.
Right. Well, so that first tier, I guess you could say, the first battle for all of them, sort of that domain of understanding yourself, understanding that your strength supersedes the sort of egotistical boasting and not being intimidated in general. And then we have the next test for Yamcha, which is he has to literally fight a wolf. There's just a wolf dude.
He's a wolf man, and he makes fun of his wolf fang fist.
Yamcha's like, this guy's not going to be able to stand up to my wolf fang fist. And he's like, bro, I'm a fucking wolf. Like, what are you talking about?
I am a wolf. But Yamcha has mastered the domain of nature at this point. He's gone and done... Is that how you'd say it grammatically? He's gone and done what Goku did?
He went and did that thing that Goku...
He went and did that thing that
done.
Goku did before the show started.
He centered himself within the realm of the self, sort of, to say that he's...
Well, and within the chaos as well. I mean, that's really creating your order in the chaos and being able to survive there.
Right. It's an integration, right? It's definitely a sort of representation of that shadow integration, which is he's out there under the moon basically being a wolf, right? He punches a hole in the rock. He's like, he literally
instead of moving
domain.
the rock,
Yeah.
instead of moving, and we talked about that. But yeah, so he has to fight this wolf, and he beats him pretty easily, eh?
Yep.
With the Rofufu Ken.
I love the
Roga
teeth.
Fufu Ken.
Like the theme of teeth continues on, right?
Yes.
Where we see that whenever
Yamcha's sharp now. Before he was like effed up.
He was looking pretty scraggly, but
Yeah.
now we see the twinkle on his teeth, right? Which is we see this same sort of image and pose from Yamcha whenever Bulma sort of compliments him after the final confrontation with Pilaf, right?
Yeah.
They're dancing together and he hurts her and he's like, "Oh, are you okay?" And she says, "I am now." And we see like
Ding. Yeah.
we get the same thing from him, right? We get
Yeah,
to see
well,
that
we see that
representation of him.
multiple times within Yamcha, and I think it's just to show that Yamcha has that intonation of enlightenment within him, but it's small because it pretty much happens. Like it happens when Yamcha's doing well.
It happens when he's on the right track, when he's on the path, right?
Yeah. Not always when he loses, but he loses a lot. So after Yamcha, we do see Goku fight a martial arts master.
He fights the same thing, which is hilarious.
He fights the same thing as
Yamcha. He's
oh,
like,
yeah, I see.
He calls it his Lion Fang Fist.
Lion's Fang style.
in the English.
Yes. Yeah, he fights the same thing as Yamcha.
Which is just like, does Goku beat the same thing that Yamcha beats? He just literally throws him. He's like, "No, get out of here." Like
he just throws him.
He just straight up picks him up and he's like,
To
"So long,
say-
Gay Bowser."
To say that the spirit of Goku is strong enough to thrust aside the facade and illusion of grandeur behind like grand martial arts moves and names like the Rogafufu Ken, which is the exact thing it's making fun of here.
Well, not only that, again, Yamcha put a hole in the boulder, and when we were seeing the guys train, they had to move the boulder. This is Goku literally moving this guy out of the ring, right?
Yeah, it's like
Doesn't even fight him. He just goes like, oh, "Okay, like I moved the boulder."
I'll move
like
you.
my relationship with nature, right? With my nature is that like I literally just toss you aside.
Yeah. And that's Goku's last match, I do believe, before the preliminaries, and then we get to see Krillin's last match here, which is against this bear man, Who actually, it's funny that this guy is here because this is kind of a trial that's similar to Goku's in the first couple of episodes.
Right. We have he looks very similar to the Highway Bandit beast.
And he dies in a similar way. Well, not dies.
Right between the eyes, right?
Right.
And we see his tooth snapping off down there as well, right? Which, again, we're talking about nature. We're talking about the integration of the shadow and the conquering of the bestial side, or your integration with the self, all those different ideas. And this is basically whenever holy crap, whenever Krillin was running across the world to get to Roshi's, it represented Krillin's conquering of the domain that this fight is representing for all the characters, right?
Yeah, and I think this is the preliminary rounds are to show what it's to gauge the strength of spirit of the boys, because we can see them defeating certain particular opponents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Goku actually doesn't fight like one of these big bear men.
No, he has to fight a big lizard man later, but
and he fights he fights like a big wrestler, but he doesn't fight a bestial man. I don't think he fights one for a while, if at all, because he's already conquered that domain. And it's just to show that both Krillin and Yamcha have conquered that domain to, induce the idea that, hey, maybe they'll be able to defeat Goku. That's necessary because it's not to say that Goku is all powerful and his strength of spirit is always going to prevail.
Yeah, this aspect of Goku, as we know, was inherent to the introduction of his character whenever he had the 4-star Dragon Ball in his possession at the beginning of the show. But this is definitely to set us up and say, okay, that baseline that we talked about, we're going past that now, right? We are stepping up in the hierarchy from that.
Exactly.
Where our baseline side characters are above that now.
And we don't need to worry. We're now going to be participating in a hierarchy of hierarchies, the battle of the heavens. And we'll get into the I think it's quarterfinals they call it. We'll get into that next time. But before we do, there's one last thing here that I want to mention. And that is Roshi's been gone basically this whole episode, right?
Yeah, he's just been missing. And I think they commented one time, where did Master Roshi go? He's missing the fights, right?
Yeah, and we at this point don't know where he's been. But we do see that he catches up to them, and we're going to see Roshi reintegrate into the hierarchy next episode. And I kind of wanted to end on this for that reason.
Yeah, that's our first hint.
And I think just to cap it off from what you were saying, this episode is really about leaving the old hierarchies behind and moving on to the real battle under the heavens.
Yeah, it's a lot of cleanup from earlier episodes, right? It's like, let's resolve the situation with where Krillin is with
How
his
strong
bullies.
is he? Yeah.
Let's resolve the fact that Yamcha, is actually worthy to be in this tournament with Goku, right? We have to set up where Bulma is in sort of whether or not she's going to learn anything from this. So we have to reestablish the relationship between Oolong and Bulma, right? So there's a lot of this episode that's groundwork so that we can get into the new expressions of the hierarchy, the more articulated ones.
And that's actually, I think people really enjoy this season, or like the saga of the Tenkaichi Budokai, because it is an expression of that hierarchy. And we're going to get into that next time a little bit. We're going to be talking about some unsavory topics.
Real deep archetypal analysis there.
Real deep. I mean, there is some deepness to it about Krillin's. It is really, well, we'll get to it then, but I'll just say for now, it is Krillin against himself, really, in that fight.
Right. It might not be a whole episode's worth of him in that fight.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how long we can make it. I mean, this episode actually, I think we had a lot more to say than I originally thought we would. So
yeah, definitely more than, let's say, the Krillin episode coming up.
Yeah. But if you liked what you heard, please give us a like and subscribe.
Click on the bell icon.
The bell icon. We're glad to see that our channel is growing slowly, but it is growing. And remember, I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And we'll see you guys next time.